Eswar is a senior Power Platform dev at Resonate. He comes with 20 plus years of industry experience, focusing on various Microsoft 365 platforms and services. He's quite passionate about AI and NLP and has a personal goal of using AI to solve complex real world problems for his peers and customers. And he is going to walk us through an example of an end-to-end implementation of ALM in Power Platform. And it's going to and also provide an overview of what it takes to deliver enterprise-grade Power Platform applications to your customers. All yours, Eswar.
Thank you. First of all, I am running Teams through the browser. So if you find me suddenly disappearing, it's only because something went drastically wrong. I will connect back as soon as I can if that happens. So please bear with me, right? So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Please let me know if you can see it. Anything?
We can see it.
Awesome, right? So let me play. I've got a few slides that I would like to kick off with, and a quick walkthrough of something, a sort of an example of how ALM can be used to enhance your Power Apps building and and management thing. Right. So well, first of all, thank you all for staying on. So I will kick off the presentation by saying that this is going to take you on a bit of a deep dive into some ALM concepts. Now, there is going to be a lot of acronyms and a lot of, a lot of buzzwords thrown about. But if you find that there are a few that you do not understand, or if you want to have a more deep conversations about it, please connect with me, and I'm happy to answer them. Right. So today, what we are going to look at is a bit of a case study on ALM in Power Platform, right? I am going to be comparing ALM Accelerator a bit with what we have, what I have put together, and compare and contrast so that you can make a decision on how you see or where you see these techniques help, right? You could actually mix and match because ALM Accelerator is quite open source, which means that you can apply some of the techniques that I'm going to show you into ALM Accelerator as well. But I'm going to have a counterpoint to ALM Accelerator, just to make it more interesting, because we know that ALM Accelerator is a phenomenal tool to get started with ALM within Power Platform. But is that enough? That would be the argument that I'm going to make, right? So we'll start by talking about who I am. I think Geeta has given a very nice introduction to me. I'm a senior Power Platform engineer or developer at Resonate. At Resonate, we build these communication products. Our apps are being used to manage like 200,000 plus users, data and details, and we have been quite successful at doing that way. We are quite a team-centric team. And the reason why I'm saying all of this is because that augments the point I'm trying to make is that we can scale Power Platform to that extent, and we can also scale our ALM for Power Platform to that extent. My focus has always been Power Platform, Microsoft Azure, and a lot of AI. I am a coder by DNA. I've been a pro dev for a long time. I have a very healthy respect for citizen developers. I know what you guys are going through, and I'm here to help you as an ally. I'm quite passionate about artificial intelligence, like Geeta was saying, and I quite believe that artificial intelligence can solve a lot of problems that we have in the world. My specialization is in language. Again, if you have any interest in talking about language and NLP and artificial intelligence, please connect with me and on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help you. Now, when I start presentations, I typically go with by explaining what I'm going to talk about and what I'm not going to talk about, so that you have a view of you have your view of your expectations that you can set for the presentation. So for this presentation, we are going to discuss ALM practices, right? Not just the ALM as a tool, the ALM accelerator as a tool, but a practice, what ALM means. With a bit of a scenario walkthrough. We look at a potential design for it. I'm not saying that this is the best design for it, but this is a potential design. But I also have to apologize that I wanted to build do an ALM accelerator based approach, a demo for that as well, just to compare and contrast. I could not because it does take quite a long time to set up ALM accelerator if anyone has set it up, and you have to jump through a million hoops before you get to the point. So I have targeted this presentation at Power Platformers, who wish to know some of the best practices around managing their applications lifecycle and deployment. Quite possibly you might have heard of some of these concepts that's being discussed, but there might be things that you may not have heard. Again, like I said, send some questions in the chat, and I'm happy to talk about that. Right. I will keep asking you if you are able to hear me, because I just don't want to. I just want to make sure that I'm still online. Am I?
You're good.
Can you? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Right. So what I would like to do is start by explaining what ALM actually means. Right. You might have heard of it. It expands to this phrase called application lifecycle management. Right. When you have dealt with ALM accelerator, you probably would have dealt with this section here. But there is a lot more to ALM. I mean, it's not just about building an app and sending it across to various customer places or other environments. There's a lot more thought that needs to go into it. Like you might have heard ALM with the other word, which is the DevOps, right? And they're complementary. They are not replaced. They don't replace each other. They are not two different standards. They're complementary. They work with each other to provide you with a set of guidelines which you can use to implement a practice which allows you to quickly build applications as well as deploy it in an accurate form, less error prone, and less sort of, it's more developer friendly, more developer QA friendly, as well as, the user friendly as well. So I had a bit of discussion on this last time I presented on this Power Ops in a different thing. I think you might find that the recording somewhere, but I would like to quickly go through what these means, right? So ALM, the life cycle of an application, or the life of an application, doesn't start with when you start writing code or when you start building your app. It starts way before that. It starts with this governance plan, which is basically you need to figure out what this system needs to do. You need to figure out what you want to build, but then you also need to figure out how to plan to build it. You also need to audit the list of requirements to see if there are any data and security issues that you need to identify in the first place itself, so that you can then do the actual design, which is the development phase. So you do the design, you do the implementation. During the implementation, you want to make sure that your app actually continues to work, in the live environment. For that purpose, what you do is you do continuous integration, which is a form of basically going, look, someone else, there is an X app, a Y app, and an Z app. You bring them all together, see if they work together very well. Now imagine a situation where you've got an app that connects to Azure, some Azure APIs. It may be connecting to in the case like Paul mentioned, the file system connector. It is an integration point. It is not something that is contained within your app. It does have to talk to other systems. So how does it work? How does your app work? Or how can your apps work? In such scenarios. So you need to continuously test it every time you make a change. I mean, in real life scenarios, and in high class, enterprise grade systems, you have to test it very, very regularly. And that that obviously means that the developers and the QA team are quite busy trying to figure out if there is something wrong, which is not what we want. So we want to reduce the bottleneck by automating that part, right? So your implementation is still by the developers. They may be developing it, but there will be an automated system that's continuously testing to make sure that the app works with everything else that the app needs to talk to, right? Then you go to the formal, once you've finished your development, you go to a more formal testing, right? You'll be asking the users to test it. You'll be doing some unit testing. Again, the unit testing is not something that we do a lot in Power Platform. If someone has done unit testing, I would love to hear about that, as in testing the Canvas apps, formulas, etc. But then there is a more important things like system testing, which is where you actually run the system through various stages and scenarios, and making sure the system works in all those scenarios, right? And flagging up that thing. That is an intensive process, as you can imagine, right? So if the app is like 15 screens long, you still need to test every screen, every field on there. Again, we apply automation in different places, and different models of testing. One is basically automated UI testing, which is a computer sits there, clicks on the buttons to make sure that it runs, and if it finds the issues, it flags it up. Then comes the more important bit. This is where our interaction with the ALM accelerator comes in quite a lot. This is where the application that you have created is deployed to various various environments and various stages. Typically, you'll have a dev, QA, staging, and live environments. So this is a way to move the application through different environments based on the status of your project. So it may be that you have introduced a new feature. You want to make sure that it is tested, so you'll deploy it to a QA environment. Once the testing is okay and you get a thumbs up, you then take that and move it to the staging environment, make sure that it works. There's a little bit of user acceptance testing that happens there, and then once that's finished, we then move it to live. Now, imagine a developer or a QA engineer basically sitting there and deploying it, downloading how Power Platform deployments happen manually. You download the zip file, you then send it across to the next stage, and then to the next stage, and to the next stage. And imagine you have like 15, 16 apps. I mean, at Resonate, we do build quite a lot of apps, and our product suite is filled with these kind of apps, and of different types. I mean, it's not just Canvas apps. We have model-driven apps. We have Power Platform portals. All of these need to be tested together, and they need to be moved together as well. So the amount of time a dev or a QA will be spending moving this across would be quite, you can see how much of time is wasted there. That the final part of ALM, and this is extremely important, and I don't think we give enough importance to it, that we cannot stop development of an app, just because the app is in live. Users are continuously giving you feedback, and and people are finding bugs in it. You're fixing the bugs in it. So what literally happens is that you get a cycle from maintenance back to the governance, back to development, back to testing, deployment, and back again. So for each of the changes that you're making to the app, it needs to go through this entire cycle. That itself is quite an intense process, as you can imagine, because some of the bugs could be quite dramatic and quite drastic, and we might need to fix it as soon as possible. In which case, I don't know about you guys. As a developer, I have done this quite a lot. There's a tendency to skip some of these, and basically go, well, you know what? It's just a change here. I'll just build it, download it, and deploy it straight to live without going through the process. And you know what happens then, right? So if something happens, there is no way to figure out who changed what, why was it changed, where the change happened. None of that documentation exists. So we literally, 5 days later, 5 months later, if someone finds an issue which probably had come up from this little dance that we did to get a bug fixed quickly, then you'll be hard pressed to find where that problem occurred from. So you can see how the entire application lifecycle is bottlenecks upon bottlenecks upon bottlenecks, which stops us from actually building and deploying things quickly and for the customers. So how do we solve it, right? So there are a few tools that we can use, and the first one obviously is ALM Accelerator. I don't know how many, if you have seen ALM Accelerator work before, it's fantastic, like it's phenomenal. It itself is a power app, right? So that itself, it's sort of like this inception sort of thing, where there is a power platform app that's actually doing power platform deployments of your own power platform solution. So it's just quite a nice magical thing to it. The great thing about this is that, you know, it's still a viable solution. I'm not saying that, you know, I talked about the entire ALM process and where it's where some of ALM Accelerator doesn't help in certain areas, but at the same time it is still a very viable solution for app makers who do not want to do. I mean, if it's an organization, you're building apps internally for your organization, what is the point of building this huge ALM app if it's simply an app that collects, you know, collects phone numbers or something, or it does surveys. But that said, ALM has a lot of work in the background. The AOI looks nice, but there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to happen in the background, and you will have to involve Azure engineers. You'll have to involve environment engineers, platform engineers, someone who knows what Azure DevOps, Azure pipelines, how the Azure pipelines are to be set up. All of these people need to come together to get it right and set it up, and then you can take advantage of the ALM Accelerator. So I'm not saying it's not a viable solution, but there is a lot of work behind the scenes. It does not support GitHub-based processes. I'm not sure how many of us actually use GitHub as a project management tool or a DevOps tool, but it at the moment doesn't support GitHub-based processes. And then there's this fine-grained control. And when we walk through the scenario, you'll see how that there is an impact on on some of this because of the fact that there's a tiny bit of a control challenge with ALM Accelerator. One of the biggest bugbear for me, at least from where I'm sitting, is it relies on the makers to push the process forward, which means that the initiators of this process is always the maker, a person who's developing. You know, this might work in majority of the cases. In some of the cases, that's not viable. That's not reliable. The reason being that the QA team who are testing your massive application, which integrates with APIM and all sorts of things, they would want to control when a piece of software ends up in the test system. I know that there's an approval process built into it, but it's not sufficient enough. It doesn't give the QA team enough information about what happened inside the app or what change happened inside the app for it to move forward. That said, I'm pretty sure that ALM Accelerator is going to be a really nice tool in the future, and I'm sure the community will do a lot of work on it to make it work better. But I personally have used the code and the scripts that ALM Accelerator, the guys have built within ALM Accelerator to learn how certain things are done. A classic example is activating flow. So when you do this ALM based thing, you will find that at some point of time, when you deploy a flow, it basically deploys, everything is nice, but then it's turned off automatically by the deployment process, which is not what we want. We want it to be turned on once it's deployed. So there's a tiny nice little piece of code within ALM Accelerator's source code, which does that automatically for you. Stuff like that is a great way to study, how it's been built and how it can be useful. So a bit more about ALM Accelerator. Like I said, the maker team basically does do most of the work, most of the heavy lifting. They do the development in their own development environment. There's a manual push here, which is what is disagreeable in enterprise grade applications, because we want a bit more control over the process. And then once it hits there, the pipelines take over and it's deployed to different environments, and perhaps even a validation test is performed on it automatically. So it is clever, it is very good, but there are some niggly issues with it, which I will cover in the next few slides. But before I do that, I would like to pause, and I would like to ask if you have any questions at this stage before I move on.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but
Okay.
anyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute or post it in the chat. Happy to take it on. I'll keep a track of it, Eswar, if you want to
Brilliant.
continue.
Fantastic.
And I'll help you on that.
Great. So I'm going to set the context for the next few slides. I want to make sure that we know we understand the challenges that a modern enterprise grade software engineering team goes through or faces when they build these applications and for their customers or themselves. The first thing you would have heard this quite a lot, and I'm sure we as dev and QA people know this to be true. We are extremely busy. We are jumping from one project to the other project, one app to the other app, but trying to build, trying to plan for the next stage, etc. So to rely on devs and QAs to initiate a very, very important process, I do not think that's a great idea. We need to free them from this process itself, so that they can continue to do what they are doing, but intervene at the right stages so that they can basically go, yep, we are ready to do it, and then the process takes on itself. Apps may have more than one Power Platform service in use, and this is something very, very common. A solution that we are building may not just contain Canvas app. It may have Canvas apps. It may have Power App, Power Pages, Power Apps portals. A solution may contain, Power Automate flows. It may contain data flows. It may contain all sorts of things which need to go together. Right. Unfortunately, at the moment, the ALM processes that we have with a tool like ALM Accelerator does not support Power Portals. At least that's what I have seen. It does support solutions. It does support Dataverse solutions, but it doesn't support Power Portals. So, which means that if there's a Power Portal, and if you use Power Portal, it's a nice little portal that looks at data within Dataverse, which is probably a model-driven app in some cases. So, which means that they need to work in tandem. A change in the Dataverse table should also impact the Power Portal. So they need to literally go together, if that makes sense. So which means that you will start a process with the ALM Accelerator, but then you have to jump back into Power Apps, into Power App Studio to do the rest of the process, which is jarring, if you like. Changes, and this is very important in large scale enterprise applications, change management is an extremely important element. We cannot change things just because we want to change it. It needs to be planned, it needs to be discussed, and it needs to be agreed. It needs to go through a level of scrutiny before it even becomes a development thing, right? The final bit about this, that auditing and documentation of changes are an important aspect of ALM. And let me explain that. Let's imagine that you've got an app and you've built that app, it's gone into production. You're continuing to build the new features into the app. Suddenly a bug is raised, right, somewhere. Now we need to figure out whether the bug was caused by some changes that you made before, or whether it's a new thing that they have found, right? How do you travel back in time to figure out, or travel through the process, or travel backwards in the process to figure out what change caused that? Because that will have an impact on what changes need to be made, right? So how do you do that without a way of tracking back to the source? So that is probably quite difficult to achieve if you do not. I mean, we cannot simply rely on Canvas apps versions. I mean, there is version history in Canvas app, but then how do you do that for model-driven apps? How do you do that for Portal, which doesn't have the inherent concept of versioning, etc. Right? So those are all the challenges that we need to remember before we build or implement an ALM strategy. So what I'll do is I'll just do a quick scenario breakdown of the big problem that for which we have to find a solution, right? The scenario is like this. I'm building the high level requirements is that I'm building a portal, a portal that collect feedback from my customers, right? So you it's not just enough that there's a portal. We need to be able to analyze the feedback that's come back, right? We need to be able to manage that feedback. We need to be able to action the feedback that's come through, and in the meantime, keep letting the customers know that things are progressing, and then the feedback is in progress. Sort of like the user voice thing that we have in Microsoft's various websites. We also want to do something clever, like use AI to analyze the feedback and make decisions. For example, we want to know whether the feedback is positive or negative, and based on that, we need to make decisions on what to do and what to cater for. Now, the last thing I have earmarked in red, only because of the fact that I could not build that part of the demo. It's not just enough that we collect the data. We need to be able to analyze the customer engagement using Power BI. So all of this becomes that requirement, that software that we are going to build. So what will it look like in your My Portal software, for a lack of a better word, will contain one Power Apps portal, one model-driven app with data flows, etc., at least one cloud flow, and one Power BI dashboard. They all need to go together because they all work together. You cannot change the model-driven app and then expect the portal to just just work. It may not happen. So we need to be able to test it together. We need to be able to deploy it together as well. Now, you can see where things will start becoming problematic in the ALM accelerator world. But what sort of solution do we have? What tools can we do, right? So the first thing we need is a place to track our work, right? So we need to know what work we are doing so that we can then figure out what went into a package that went to the customer, right? We also need a place where the developers can build the apps, which is a dev environment, as we call it in Power Platform. We need a place where the QA can do the testing, and we need a place where the users can use it. So when it comes to figuring out where things fit, Azure Boards is a nice place to track work. And if you have seen Azure Boards, you'll see how you can create user stories, you can create tasks, and you can then work through them, right? And you can plan a sprint if you have used agile sprint planning methodologies. You can plan a sprint, create a box of work and then finish the box of work and track them through to the completion, right? Now once we have figured out what work we are doing and where we are going to do the work on, we cannot leave it alone. We need to be able to bring that solution back from one place to the other. So for example, if you have if developers would probably go, well, I've done the work, now it needs to be tested, and then immediately that piece of work that we have done needs to move to QA, and then another and once the QA is completed, it needs to move to live. So the only way to do that is automation, because we cannot rely, like I said before, we cannot waste devs and QA's time, doing this sort of, downloading, uploading to various places. So we integrate CI/CD into this process, and we use Azure pipelines to do that. And behind the scenes, if you have drilled down into ALM Accelerator, it does use Azure pipelines, pretty much the same way that everyone else is using in Azure pipelines, right? So Azure pipelines, we have a collection of work. We know what work has been completed, and we know that the development has been completed. We have a CI/CD pipeline to move it from one environment to the other, depending on where we are. But then there's a problem. Azure DevOps, Azure Boards does not know anything about what's happening in the Power Platform world. In Pro Dev world, if you're a pro developer, you know that by checking in a source code, and synchronizing it with a source control, the CI/CD pipelines can look at it and go, aha, something's changed, so now I need to move it. That cannot happen in Power Platform, because Power Platform by nature doesn't have a direct integration with CI/CD pipelines. Instead, it needs to be a pull rather than a push. If you can figure that one out. So we need a way to start the process, right? In ALM Accelerator, you'll be pressing that button, right? But in a complex scenario like this, where would you start, right? So the best way we can see from the best way is to use the work tracking itself. So which means in work tracking, we do something to trigger that process. But work tracking doesn't understand CI/CD pipelines. Maybe just because you create something in the work tracking area of Azure DevOps doesn't mean that it'll immediately start a pipeline. So we need to integrate all of this, right? Well, as Power Platformers, we know that Power Automate is a great way to integrate all of these things. So which means it can wait for something happening in Azure boards, run a pipeline, do some magic behind the scenes, do some prerequisite things, and then then start the process. That is possible with Power Automate, right? So we have so to wrap it up, what we are saying is that we will track the work, and with the work tracked, we'll use the CI/CD pipelines to move the work that you've completed in dev to different places, different environments, right? And we will use Power Automate to integrate all of this together, right? So I'm going to do a quick walkthrough, right? And I will walk you through the through some of these things, some of the things that we talked about right now. I do not want to drill too deep into it because of the fact that it does tend to get too technical at some point of time. However, I'm happy to talk to you after. You can connect with me, and I can explain what's happening in the scene, right? So let me quickly show you that. So let me know if you can still see the screen that I'm sharing.
Yeah, I see it.
Awesome. Right. So the work tracking within Azure boards, if you have seen this, is a nice little you have Kanban boards, you have work items, you have backlogs, you can groom your backlogs, you can convert that into sprint, and you can run through a sprint and build it. Now here are two scenarios two things that are going to go into the next release that I'm planning. Right. The first thing is that there's a description of this. As a customer service team member, I would like to add notes and information about the feedback into the system, right? Within that, for that, what we have done is we have mentioned that there are two tasks which I've already completed. The second one is, it's a very simple thing. In the portal, I want to put a welcome text on the portal, right? And then the portal welcome text should say this, right? Again, I've completed one of those tasks. I've also have a task pending at the moment, but I am ready for this to go into testing right now, right? So while the testing is happening, I can do the document changes in the wiki, right? So how do we kick it off? So the way we can kick it off, one of the ways you can kick it off is creating a work item with this very special tag. Like release is a tag that we can use. So it's a special kind of work item which the system understands. It contains information about what the release is, right? The version number to apply, as well as what all are a part of this release. So here you have two requirements that are going to be a part of the release. So I've connected it together using this nice little tool that you have in Azure DevOps called related links, and I've added them in, right? Now we are ready. The release is ready to go into QA. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the status to ready. I mean, again, this is just my implementation detail, but it doesn't need to be exactly like this. We can customize it to whatever you need. But this is equivalent to pressing that button on Azure DevOps, right? Or sorry, ALM Accelerator. The difference here is that I am auditing, I am tracking the changes that are going into the next release. I'm not simply deploying the app without any context. I'm giving it context using these the release work item. So I have saved it. Now behind the scenes, now like I said, the system doesn't, they don't quite gel well, in the sense that just because you have a work item here, we have changed the work item here, just doesn't mean that something in the pipelines will trigger automatically. So we needed help. So what we used Power Automate, and I'm just going to quickly show you what Power Automate looks like, the app looks like, so that I can see that running while it's busy doing whatever it's doing. So I got this nice little solution, a Power Automate flow. Let me open that when it comes through. Right. So that's your Power Automate flow. What it's doing is it's waiting for the release to be updated. When the release updates, we are basically going to go, well, okay, it's ready for deployment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the status. I believe it's already updated the status awaiting test results. What it means is that it is deploying the app to QA, and the release has basically changed the fact that, well, someone needs to test it, right? Um, as it progresses, it updates the status, it queues the build pipeline, it links the release to the build, which probably should have happened already. As you can see, it's built, it's linked. That's how that's how the traceability works, if you like, in the ALM world, where this release note that we have prepared is linked to a build process that is actually deploying the app to the other end. And then finally, what we do is we also link individual elements here. So here you have this thing also linked to the same build. Now, this was just as an example for me, but in some of the implementations that I have done, what I have done is I've converted the list of related things that are going with the build into a release note, like a Word document that contains all the information about the release that are being planned. That then can be used by the QA team, by the product manager, the product owner, to figure out what is going in the next release. It can also become, if you like, a customer release note at some point of time, right? Especially if you're deploying to public cloud places like AppSource, etc., right? So let's go back. So once it's done, it links up everything, and that's the end of that flow. Very simple flow, a few steps, but it is doing a magic for us. So let's go into the build pipeline. It's going to take a bit of time, right? And while it's doing whatever it's doing, and I'm really hoping that my yeah, okay, I waited too long, right? So what what I need to do is I need to kick off there is an agent running in an Azure somewhere, which is basically does the deployment. But I'll crack on, and I'll show you what the end result is going to be looking like, right? So let's go into the dev environment first. What the dev environment is doing, is that the portal change that I have done. This is what I wanted to show, going through to the next stage. So the QA portal, if I were to go into the QA portal, you'll see that the change has not happened here, but you can see that the headline is different. So what I'm expecting the DevOps pipeline to do is basically deploy it, and this change to the this change being applied there. The one thing that you also see, something that you probably already noticed, that there is a dev tag here, right? In the QA tag, there's a QA tag there. This is also a part of the pipeline process, which means that during the deployment process, it has actually automatically applied a profile to say that, well, I'm deploying to QA. So I will tag that site with QA, and the same thing can happen to staging and live if you wish. Right. So the app itself, I just want to quickly run through the app while it was doing. I will just imagine that's happening in the background. The app is pretty simple. All it does is basically it collects feedback, and when the portal is done, the feedback will come through the portal into this table here in Dataverse. And as a part of that process, what it does is it basically goes off to the AI builder. Let me quickly show you that. It goes off to the AI builder, to figure out what sentiment has been understood from the description, and then update the row with the sentiment data, which is what you saw here, positive or negative, because this feedback basically says this doesn't work or something like that, so not good, and it's detected automatically that it's a negative sentiment, as well as this one being, it's fantastic, this is great service, thanks for coming from Thorshol, that's considered as positive, so it marks it as positive. Now, this was just a demonstrate the fact that this is a very complex flow, which the reason why it's complex is because there are connection references between them, right? There are connections within them which deal with AI builder as well as Dataverse, right? But if you have done Power Automate before, you know that when you're moving a solution from one environment to the other, in the new environment, if the connection doesn't exist, the flow refuses to run, and you get all sorts of problems, right? But with deployment, with the deployment, profiles, etc., we can make sure that it automatically hooks up to the right connection when it ends up in the different environments, and we can have different connections for different environments, and we can have as many profiles as there are as many profiles as there are environments in your space, right? So let me see if I can actually kick it off. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Hey, sure. We did have a question from Chaitali. It's more on the ALM accelerator. So she's asking, are we using ALM accelerator before or after deployment?
ALM accelerator before or after deployment. ALM accelerator is the tool that you use to deploy to different environments. So if you have a dev environment, you want to move their solution to the next environment, the ALM accelerator is the tool that you use to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And does that come with a cost, or is it a free?
No, ALM accelerator is a open source free tool.
Okay.
Right. But that said, there is a catch. The ALM accelerator uses Azure pipelines. It uses Azure pipelines. It uses some element of Azure VMs or something like that. That has a cost to it. So which means the tool itself doesn't have a cost to it, but you still need the Azure things to work for it to work. So which will probably increase your bill. You need more than one environment to do, obviously you need more than one environment. So the environments come with a cost as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let me see if I can kick it off.
I was just going to add, it does use Dataverse and custom connectors. So if you're using the ALM accelerator for Makers version, then there's that premium licensing for those users as well. Apart from the GitHub paid plan and all of that that you mentioned, but from a platform environment standpoint, that's something you'll have to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Any other questions you had on anything that I have discussed now? While my magical thing starts up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, or maybe just share that the flow connection references are always a challenge working with, especially when you're deploying content from from one environment to the other. I think that's it's come a long way from where it was way back then, and then with how things are doing, I mean, or how they have things improved now. But did you, or were there any trial and errors, any challenges that you faced when you were trying to do it this route of going the traditional ALM? Using the
what I will
build
do. Yeah, what I will do is I will just quickly open up the pipelines. I understand that many of you may not have seen this in this form, but I'll quickly open the pipelines and I'll show you what it looks like, right? So a pipeline is basically a collection of steps and jobs that runs in sequence, right? And you can design it in the UI, or you can write YAML. These days YAML is way more interesting. But one of the things that we do as a part of, and I just want to quickly show you that part because that is an important element. That's probably the one that you're more interested in. So this step here is basically solution is importing that model-driven app with the flow into the target environment, which is a QA environment in this case. But you can see that you can also specify a settings file, a deployment settings file, right? Let me show you how it looks like, right? The deployment settings files look like this. Connection references, right? The connection, the logical name of the connection, and you need to jump through a bit of hoops to figure out what that logical name is. The new connection ID, this is the ID of the connection within the QA environment where you're deploying it to, and the type of the ID. If you specify it this way, I have seen that it links up quite nicely, right? what is hard to get right is this name here, right? I have seen that sometimes when when you say, imagine you messed up the dev environment, they have restored the dev environment from somewhere else, the connection reference immediately changes, which means that it doesn't keep the connection reference, in which case you need to come back here and update the connection references with that name. What it's literally telling you, what it's literally saying is that the connection reference is basically says that I would like a connection of this type, right? The connector ID basically says that this is the connection that is of that type, which will work for you. And the connector ID obviously identifies the type of connection that we are trying to be. If you get this right, I see magic, right? So because it just goes into the new environment, automatically links it up, and everything is fine, right? What I have also seen though is that the first time you deploy a flow, right, through this process, it turns it automatically off, which means that the moment it ends up in the solution, the target environment, it's automatically off. What I have seen though, and I cannot confirm this because I've not done enough experiments, is that if the first time you deploy, you turn it on, the second time you deploy, it's fine, right? So that seems to be the general play here. However, in the ALM accelerator world, which I'm quite keen to import into my own solutions, is that there's a tiny little script which nicely goes off and activates all the flows that have been turned off as a part of the deployment state, which will be fantastic if we can do that, right? The other thing that you might have noticed is environment variables, right? So each environment may have different, you might be using environment variables in your solution. This is also a way to apply changes to environment variables for different, for different environments. So that there is a bit of an automation here, but it's coming through quite nicely. There is also another part of the deployment settings file, which I think went live a few months ago, a few weeks ago, I don't know, where you can actually specify that as a part of, let me actually show you this, and you'll see what I mean. So this is the QA portal, right? In the QA portal, if I were to go into the solution, let's go into the solution. When it's ready. So if I were to go to solution, you see the owner here. This owner is the service application, or whatever the Azure thing is, which was, Azure, the account that you use to deploy the solution. And you can see that it's still loading because it can't resolve it properly, but you can see that the owner is not you, not a particular person, it is something, right? And that something, it may cause a lot of issues if you're actually looking to audit things, or if you want to change this at later on stage. So how do we change that? And there is apparently in the new version of this deployment settings file, you can specify that the flows owner should be this person. So it's quite nice that way, in the sense that you can then use that flow ownership to to change the ownership on the fly. So these are a few things that I want to tell you. Portal also has its own deployment settings thing, which allows you to make changes to the different parts of the portal depending on the environment. And that's how you saw that in the dev it says dev, and in the QA it'll say QA, and the live it'll say live. Because I'm not making it, it's not three different portals, it's one portal being deployed to different environments with application of different different portal settings, right? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. I think that was very helpful to see just how it all kind of falls into place.
Yeah, so this deployment has started. So I'm hoping that I can show it to you, but that's all right. It does 4 or 5 things at the same time. It basically, it downloads all the source code as a part of the continuous integration that I was talking about. It downloads the source code for the portal and the solution and the flow and everything, and then checks it into the source control so that you can reference it whenever you want. And then it does a more involved process of converting something into a managed solution, deploying it to the QA, etc., etc. So hopefully, I don't want to keep you too long, but hopefully that made sense. And if you have any questions on any aspect of what I've shown, please let me know. I'm happy to have a debate on ALM accelerator versus all of this, and it'll be fantastic, I'm sure. So please, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Sure, this was awesome. I think I loved how much of detail you actually did share, and I love how you kind of walked us through the different approaches of there's the ALM accelerator approach of doing things. If you're starting off with the platform and you're trying to get a starter template, that's a great way to get started. But then also diving deep into things that may not work well there, or you're looking to customize and go for a more sophisticated enterprise level ALM, then go with the traditional approach of doing Azure DevOps pipelines and then setting up your releases and then working with environment variables and then kind of just tying it all together. Thank you so much for setting up that demo too. I think it went really well. It was really cool to see how you structure your framework for getting things started from Azure boards until things getting deployed into the other environments. So this is definitely very, very helpful to watch. I do have a couple of questions, but we have a question in the chat. I don't know, Vinay, did you want to come on, unmute yourself and ask the question? We kind of have open forum for the next 5 minutes. Anyone feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hey, thanks for the session. My question to you was around, did you get a chance to play around or leverage the GitHub Enterprise for Power Platform and then, create a pipeline in GitHub? Which one is better, like the Azure DevOps or GitHub? What are the Microsoft direction going forward? What are they recommending?
That's actually a phenomenal question, Vinay. I was not sure if anyone was actually even interested in GitHub when I want to talk about it. GitHub is amazing. It's the GitHub Enterprise, the GitHub Actions. By the way, Microsoft is mirroring whatever it's doing for Azure DevOps in GitHub Enterprise as well, except for the ALM accelerator for now. But I'm sure people are working behind the scenes to build that for GitHub as well. So they are mirroring whatever they are building. So there is a Power Platform build tools for Azure DevOps, and they have a mirror of that in GitHub as well. So from a usability perspective, GitHub is very much a great tool to have, but from a sprint planning and and all that perspective, I don't think that the GitHub's projects workspace is not up to mark compared to, say, Azure DevOps. This is my personal opinion. It may be subjective. Many people love GitHub, and they entire open source, massive things have, Python. Even they built Python on and they use GitHub for storage on that. So I won't diss it, but at the same time, for me, Azure DevOps and Azure boards feels natural. It feels like it's the connectivity between, or the way you can associate things quite easily. All of that makes so much sense to me. But GitHub at the same time is a nice open way of doing things. For example, in Azure DevOps, when you're linking things together, you have a way of unofficially linking it using comments, but at the same time you have a more structured way of linking work items together. That helps when I'm building flow, like I showed you, where it's looking at all the links for a release and then building it out, and building a maybe release node, etc., which may be difficult with GitHub Enterprise, right? So that kind of automation, for me, Azure DevOps works well. In terms of direction from Microsoft, I have not seen anything saying either or the other. Azure DevOps seems to be their prime focus because it is their product, as you can imagine. GitHub is also in a way their product, but GitHub is way more traditional in the way it looks at open source. It was built for open source, if that makes sense. So everything in there is for open source, to encourage open source development, etc. Right. So that's my personal opinion. But if anyone has any other opinions, I'm really keen to hear that as well.
Hey, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I was just going to add that from a direction standpoint, I mean, you do, like you said, you kind of see both worlds, the Azure world, DevOps world of things coming into play at certain components, and then you also see the Git integration as well. Like, for example, the co-authoring feature that they enabled, is tightly tied with the Git. So I think we may have to kind of wait and see if there's ever going to be like a pick and choose on both sides. But right now, I mean, there are benefits on both sides, and what you would do. There might be some features that you would have to rely on Git to be able to work with. But then if you want the full picture, like Eswar said, having your tasks and work items and everything linked, DevOps just seems more natural. But that may also be because we come from a more pro dev background, and so we're just it's just more natural for us to go that way. But it would be interesting to see interesting to hear what others think of it too.
Oh, Geeta, by the way, the co-authoring also works with Azure DevOps. So all you need to do is make the repository as a Git repository, and then co-authoring works.
Yeah.
That is only the Git repository. I was more interested in the Git pipeline and the Git, build actions, whether they have the same parity or the same sort of, ready to use.
On that, yes, there is. On that, especially in the Power Platform, from the Power Platform world, there definitely is, right? But the funny thing about this is that GitHub, if Git actions can be run on a hosted solution, and the hosted solution can be a Windows server, which means that all the PowerShell scripts and all the the Power Platform CLI commands all work naturally because it's anywhere running on Windows, if that makes sense. So from a parity perspective, I don't see that that different, right? But it's subjective as well. For me, Azure pipelines and the way you visualize it seems so natural to me. That's, again, it could be simply because I'm used to it, right? Whereas GitHub Enterprise, GitHub Actions are a bit more open, a bit more sort of old worldy, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
But that was thanks for the question. I love GitHub, and I'm glad that there is someone else who's keeping track of what's happening in GitHub world. Any other questions that I can answer at the moment?
And I know we're at time here, a little over our 6:30 time slot. But thank you, Eswar, for taking the time on a late Thursday night to join us. I know you're almost way past your midnight time there, so thanks a lot for getting all of that showcases set up and walking us through it. And then all our attendees, I know some of you are already part of the user group and you are members, but for anyone who's not, and for anyone who's watching the video on demand, please feel free to join the group to stay on the know on updates and future events. So this is definitely something that we enjoy hosting. We're looking to host one every month, and wanting to get a variety of guests. If you have any feedback on content or topics that you would like for us to line up and showcase, feel free to share that as well. And then, as always, we appreciate all of you taking the time to join and support our user group. And we definitely encourage and appreciate all of the collaboration and conversation that happens over here. So we're always looking forward to learning from each other.